Hi guys, welcome to day 3 tutorial for Node Express. So on day 3 we are going to learn about get request with params. It's just like means we're going to send some parameter value in the get request that will be read in our API endpoints, and we'll send the response according to the parameters defined. Then I'll cover the difference between params and query string. Means a query that is also is an optional thing that we can also specify in our URLs. The response status, as of now, you might be seeing that we make a request to an endpoint and we receive a response. And there are different response status, like status 200 is that you everything is okay, you get 200 as okay, you get 400 if you make a request and the data does not exist. So we'll look into the how we can define the response status. And finally, updating the swagger docs. So on the last day, day 2, we have already learned about how we can start our API servers, a simple GET request, and installing libraries, node and configured Swagger documents. So on the day 3, we are going to learn about the GET request using parameters and queries and response status, and then we'll update our Swagger docs as per the new GET request with params that we are going to define. So let's get started. Okay. So I'll go to my tutorial. This is where I ended, and let me clear all this out. So right now we have seen that we make a get request and we are sending the list of all the employees. So what in the case when you want details of a particular employee, right? And we have defined a data for this. Suppose I entered 5 times 1 in my get request and I get the detail of John Cena. So how I can use in a get request? So how can I use it is through a passing a param to our get request. And how we can pass it is um, let me define get details of employee with an employee ID. So app dot get, as I mentioned, it takes two parameters. First is the URL, second is the callback function, and the callback function take request and response, and here I can define my endpoint, and here I can mention as colon, and I put it as employee ID. So this becomes this colon uh, designate to a param, that this is a parameter that is being passed after this endpoint employees. So any request you are passing with API slash employee slash something, this that something will be an employee ID, because after employee I have defined the parameter employee ID. So this becomes my param. So to read this particular parameter, what I have to do is it's coming as a request. Don't forget this is coming as a request. So I'll write as a request dot params dot employee ID. So this EMP ID is this particular one which reads from the URL. So let me try to send this as a response. Response dot send, and I'll put this inside this request dot params dot ID. Means I'll get this employee ID and I can specify mm, as this hello. Put this as this. So it will say hello, the employee ID, and I save it and I start my API server. my API server is started. I'll go to the URL. I already have this localhost 5007 slash APS slash employees, and I put as 11111 as an employee ID, and it will go make a request for this. So after employees this, so this becomes my 111, and it will send me a response as hello with the employee ID. So if I type this, enter it, you will see I'll get this hello. So this is how we can pass a parameter to a get request. And it's not like we can pass only one parameter. I can pass multiple parameters as well. I can pass as name as well. Let's take it as a name, and I'll read this as request.params.name. Okay, so whatever name I'm going to pass it after employee ID, it will print that. So let me save this. I'll go to this and I type it as John Cena. So it returns me John Cena. Okay, so this is your how we can pass params. We can pass one parameters, two parameters, multiple parameters as well, so, and we can read it, and how this is how your get request works with params. Now there is one more concept of called as query parameters. So what is a query parameter? Okay, so sometimes where we use params and where we use query params. So suppose in this case I want an details of an employee, right? Let me remove this. I want the details of an employee. So to get a detail of an employee ID is a mandatory field. So this is mostly recommended that any of the mandatory fields that we enter, we always make sure that it goes as slash. So this becomes a mandatory thing. While a query parameters becomes an optional thing, like suppose you want to sort it or you want to pass any optional thing which you can use. If it's passed in your request parameter, then you can use it. If it does not pass, we can use our params, the required parameter, to get our data back. So suppose in this case I and all your query params start with question mark, and if I suppose say the name equal John Cena. Okay. So this becomes your query. After question mark, anything comes, it becomes your query. So suppose now you want to use a query, so you can just okay, I'll do one thing. I'll copy this and send it as query parents, and I use the request dot query. My bad, it's case sensitive. So request dot query. So anything after a question mark will come as. So let me try to enter this, and it shows me error cannot set headers. Oh, I got it, because why I received this, because I cannot send two responses. So that's the reason the header is already set. So let me comment this out. I'll start it again and I put it. If you see my query params goes as name is equal to John, is coming as object, because I cannot append this. So let me try to remove this request query and let me enter it back. You'll get as a object. So you get a pair of key and value. So here key is your name, and the value that this name contains is John Cena. So this becomes your key value pair and comes as an object. So this is how request means you can pass the query parameters as well. So there are two things here. One is your params, in which you enter it by slash and by colon. You mention the params. Other one is an optional thing where usually you put it after question mark. If you want something and you want to read it, you can use the request.query. And suppose if I type it a request.query.name, so I'm reading the key here, and it should return me the value of that key. So if I enter this, it returns me John Cena because this is the key, and I get the value of it. So I get John Cena back. Okay, so yeah, this is how we can use the query and params both up to us, means what the mandatory thing, what are the optional thing that you want to pass. Okay, so this is how we can use the difference between the params and the query. Now let me go to the postman. I want to show you something related to the postman. So I've already installed it, postman. If you guys don't have postman installed, you can again google it, and you'll get postman. You can download it. It's an open source, so postman, and you get the first link. You can download it for free. Okay, so let me open the postman quickly. Okay, it's open. So I'll enter this here, and it's a simple get request. I just send it, and when I send it, you see I receive this response back as John Cena. But let me change this back to my query params, because usually we are going to use the request.params only. So I'm going to use this, and I'm going to run it again and get a hello and with the employee ID. Okay. So now if you have observed that I got a status as 200, okay, this is the standard response for a successful HTTP request. So if you scroll your mouse here, you'll get the definition of it. So it's this is a standard that usually every programmer follows. But if you want to, as per your organization protocols, or you want to maintain your own statuses, you can change these statuses. So suppose in this case, I want to change the status, so I can type it as response dot status in the bracket dot send, and I'll type as 201 as a successful response. I want to define it. So I just save it and I click on send. So I get the same response, but here if you see my status has been changed to 201 created. So I get a successful response which I defined. So this is how you can define it as per the statuses. Why I'm using statuses? Because when you design your API, right, and when you ask the UI guys to consume it, sometimes UI guys don't read the messages. They do their programming on the basis of what's the response. Is it a successful response? They do an action on the basis of successful response. And if it's not a successful response, because suppose 400 is the series where we use where the data is not found, so they it helps a UI guy to design their UI on the basis of how the API is sending them the statuses back. Okay, so this is one of the useful information. Now coming to the last point is updating Swagger docs. So since I have used this as an endpoint, employee ID. So if I go to my Swagger docs, and I have already implemented this, so I just in the last video I have implemented get employees. Okay, and now after this I'm going to use one of my endpoint employee ID, in which I define the name as employee ID. So and type is at number, in as path required. This is a required field. I make it at true. So if I go to my Swagger UI, if I refresh this, if you remember, we created in our last video, I have this. And if you see, I made it a required one. So I click on try it out, and this is how it goes. Something which is required, right? As I mentioned you, employee is a required one. I always need it in my params, right? Else I'll not get my employee details back. Okay, so I click on execute. I get the response back. Okay, and I get the response, the hello triple one. Okay, so this is how we configure our Swagger file. We are done for the day 3, and in the next tutorial for the day 4, I'll be using the get request with arrays methods, so that when a request is made, it will first going to look into our data.js, and it sees whether the employee ID exists or not. And if it exists, it's going to return the employee details of John Cena, which is designation. And if suppose DOB is there, then DOB will be returned as well. Okay, so we are going to work in our next tutorial, next video of this. Guys, thanks a lot for your time. And if you like this video, please subscribe our channel. It will keep me more motivating, and I'll come up with some excellent videos in our coming weeks. Thanks a lot for your time. Have a nice day.